poetic, amici. So let's talk about virtual assessment. And let's talk about building a perfect solution. Maybe it's for your assessment problem. Maybe it's for your wider problem of how do I even operate a language class in a world with hybrid and remote teaching and everything else that's going on. But let's build a perfect solution. Let's talk about how to do that for the real you, not the generic you. And I picked our theme for today with picture of a house, because when you look at that house, you're probably either thinking, okay, that is the perfect house for me, or yeah, it's okay, or no, it just wouldn't work. For example, today I might like that house, but when I had two small children, thinking about those steps, thinking about the tripping, the falling, the anxious trip to urgent care. That would not have been the perfect house when they were little, right? Because perfect for one situation can be perfectly awful for another. For example, I love the look of this kitchen and living area, but then I think about I'm not getting any younger. Someday I might not be able to climb those stairs. And perfect for today might be perfectly awful in just a little bit. And then, too, there's the question of, like, what is even the purpose? For example, here's a fun house. It's perfect for certain situations, and it's perfectly terrible for others. I was thinking about fun houses, and I was thinking about a thing that happened when I was a kid. Maybe this happened to you. Maybe this also happened if you're a parent. Maybe this has happened and you've seen it with other eyes. I just love this picture. I found it on Flickr. I was happy that it had a Creative Commons license so I could use it. So credit out there to David W.G. And I love this picture of the child looking at the funhouse mirror, trying to figure out what's going on. And my favorite part is that the child is not alone. Parent is there, holding the child, supporting the child. And that's what reminds me of this story. I was probably about 4 or 5, and it was fall. It was fair season. And we had gone to the fair, which I loved as a kid. And my dad loved food at the fair, and my mom loved lots of things at the fair. And we all loved certain rides, and we all loved food. So the day that we went to the fair was always like a special day. But on this particular fall day, when I was 4 or 5, we went into the Hall of Mirrors. And I was entranced, but I was also terrified because I didn't know how to get out of there. I was just standing there looking at these mirrors, and there was like me everywhere, different images of me, and which one was real? I mean, that's a big thought for a 5-year-old. But fortunately, Dad was right there, and Dad said, hold my hand, look at me, and we got through the funhouse. And it was actually fun afterwards, but there was that moment. It was fun for most of the time, but it was not fun when I was standing there looking at the mirrors and I couldn't figure out which way to go or what I even saw, what was real and what was just my perceptions. You may have had an experience like that too. And it may be that you're feeling like, oh wow, that's how it is right now, right? So I have a challenge for you guys. Let's see if we can re-find your teaching and assessing and planning fluency, whichever one it is, or all three, that you feel like you've lost, like this small child in the funhouse trying to figure out, trying to find their way, right? Things have changed. Things don't look the way they used to. Whether you're physically in a classroom but with some students remote and it's some weird hybrid situation, whether you're sitting in an empty, sterilized classroom talking to students over Zoom, whether you're sitting in your house talking to students over Zoom or Google Meet or whatever who are in their house, everything looks different than it did, right? And it's hard to feel fluent and comfortable and confident when everything seems to have changed. It's hard to know, like, even what you need. And that's the problem, right? is that you have to figure out the actual problem so that you can solve the actual problem. And there are a lot of people out there who are more than happy to sell you a solution, right? Or they'll even give you a solution. Latin teachers are generous, and there are lots of companies out there that are generous or not so generous. But they have different things that they'll offer you, and they'll tell you, here's the perfect solution. But the problem is, it may be the perfect solution for a general problem or a generic problem. It may not be the one that you need. It may be the perfect solution for somebody else's problem, right? If their problem is very different from your problem, it may not be such a good solution for yours. And sometimes people will offer you a solution that's a solution to their interpretation of your problem, not your actual problem, but the way that they interpreted it. I've definitely been guilty of that. I'm thinking of a conversation I had with somebody on one of the Facebook groups for Latin teachers, and I didn't know that this person had a bunch of colleagues who genuinely believed that Latin is encoded English, and the purpose of for these people of learning Latin is so that you can decode it into what it was really secretly in. He told me they genuinely believe, if they were asked, they'd never really been asked, but they genuinely believed that everybody thinks in the same language, and then you kind of like translate it into your language that you speak when you talk, and you translate it back out into the universal language, which of course is English, right? Before you, as you're understanding it. So if you believe that, I mean, that'll lead to a particular set of solutions to solve a problem with a student who isn't doing well, right? But if you don't believe that, if you know that people actually think in their language, then then your solution set is going to be different, and people will be looking at each other and just not having any idea what each other are talking about because they have a different interpretation of the problem. And I think it's really important in a time like this to solve your actual problem, not the one that somebody else thinks. And to solve your actual problem, you probably need a right blend of some things. You may need some better information. You may have a lot of information and need to sort through it, but you may actually have some missing information, right? You definitely, most of us need help with what they call curation. There's all this information. How do I pick what really applies to me, right? But then it's not just the information and the curation. A lot of us need help and support with application. Okay, I now know this thing, but what am I going to do with it? How am I going to use it? If my new friend had been able to persuade his colleagues that actually people think in different languages and they like taken this into their worldview, well, now what? What do I do now? I mean, a lot of the things that I was doing before I can still do, but I'll think about them differently. Um, a lot of the things that you used to use in your physical classroom will probably still work in a remote and hybrid situation. Some of them won't. Which ones do we apply? Which ones do we change? Because there is going to be a transformation, right? It's not the way it was. And that's hard. That's hard for us as teachers because part of our mental picture, part of the story that we tell ourselves is that, schools don't really change that much, right? And it's funny because when I moved back to my hometown a few years ago, one of the first things that I did was that I drove by my old elementary school. And when I say my old elementary school, I mean, it was a long time ago that I was in elementary school. But decades had passed. And I drove by that building and it looked exactly the same. The new sign. I think they had replaced some of the playground equipment. What was new in the mid 70s had become old and they'd gotten new. But the building itself looked exactly the way that it had, and it looked exactly the way that it does in the picture that I've seen of the day that it was dedicated in the mid 50s. So, in our story that we tell ourselves about school, one of the things that we say is, school basically hasn't changed that much, right? And yet, all of a sudden, last March, school changed a lot, and school is still changing. So, we kind of have to transform what we're doing too. But we have to have the right blend of information and curation and application and some other stuff. And what's right for you may not be right for me. What's right for little Spike? Interestingly, that picture was taken in 2008, so Spike is kind of old now. Spike is probably mortified to know that his picture is being used in this way with a Creative Commons license. But what Spike needed then, Dad holding him, or Mom, knowing that it was okay, the root of that, teenage Spike still needs today, right? Teenage Spike still needs to know that the parents are around and that they love and that they care. But how does it look? Is Spike still being held up to the mirror? Probably not. So, here's my challenge for you guys. If you need help, don't wait. Because it isn't going to get better by yourself. There's two good ways to get in touch with me. And I want to challenge you to take one of them, either the Facebook message way or the email way. And let's find some time and let's solve an actual problem together. Let's just do that. Let's make sure that I'm right about the fact that different people have different needs. Let's make sure that we know what you need. And let's solve an actual problem together. It's not going to cost you anything. Nobody's going to try to sell you anything during the 20 minutes that we spend solving your actual problem. But if you've got an actual problem and you're looking for a solution, you tried everything that you know and it hasn't been working, challenge to you to get in touch because it doesn't have to be this difficult. It does not have to be this complicated, and it definitely doesn't have to be as hard as it feels. We just need to find the right problem, the right blend of things for a solution. And it's a whole lot easier when you don't try to do that work alone. So, that challenge for you. Hope it's a good week. Hope it's things are getting better, even though it's a time of the year when sometimes in schools, the way they used to be, things weren't getting that much better. And so until the next time that we talk to each other, until I talk to some of you guys, and we solve our problems together, let me just say, Walete Sodales.